Ever since joining the World Trade Organization, India has been walking this incredible tightrope. You've got the pressure for economic growth on one side, and on the other, the need to feed over 1 billion people and take care of the planet. So in this explainer, we're going to break down this amazing balancing act and see what the data actually tells us about how to get it right.
And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This isn't just some question on a slide. It's the central challenge shaping the lives of so many people. And to really get a grip on the stakes here, we've got to zoom in on who the story is really about.
86%. That is the share of India's farmers who are smallholders. Just think about that. This isn't a story about huge, faceless corporations. Nope. It's about millions and millions of families whose entire livelihood is tied to the land and to the global policies that affect it every single day.
All right, so first up, let's get some context. To really understand where India is headed, we have to look at how it got here. And that brings us to its great balancing act. You see, it all really kicks off in 1995 when India joins the WTO. This was a huge deal. It opened up massive new markets, but it also introduced a whole new set of risks. And while the economy started to shift away from farming over time, the reality is agriculture is still the backbone of employment, kind of caught in the middle between global trade and a changing environment. And that leads us to this really key idea called the Nexus. It's a fancy word for something pretty simple. You can't just pull on one thread, like, say, trade, without it affecting everything else. The environment, agriculture, the economy, they're all tangled up in this giant, complex web. But how on earth do you even begin to untangle a web that complicated? Well, a recent study did just that, giving us a brand new way to decode this puzzle. Let's dig into how they did it.
They use this really powerful method called structural equation modeling, or SEM for short. The best way to think about it is like an economic stress test. You know, like when you go to the doctor, it lets researchers push on one part of the system, like exports, and see exactly what happens to all the other parts. It's pretty cool.
So, what did they actually test? They zeroed in on 4 key things. How much people are buying right at home? How much is being sold around the world? How intensely inputs like fertilizer are being used? And, of course, the environmental cost, which they measured in CO2 emissions. So, what did this big economic stress test actually find? Well, the results were fascinating, and they revealed what's truly helping and what's hurting India's agricultural sector. This is it. This is the big question for policymakers, right? So let's see what the data has to say. And wow, this chart just lays it all out there. Take a look at that first bar, domestic demand. What people inside India are buying and eating makes up a whopping 68.6% of the value. Now compare that to the others. Sure, exports and fertilizer help, but they are just miles behind. It's not even close. The researchers themselves couldn't be clearer about it. They say the home market is, and I quote, the primary determinant. The takeaway is huge. A strong domestic economy is the most powerful engine for its farms. But there's a cost to all this activity. And this number right here? This is the environmental price tag. The study found that for every single 1% increase in CO2 emissions, agricultural value actually goes down by more than 0.5%. It's a direct economic hit, which proves that pollution isn't just an environmental problem, it's an economic one too. Okay, now here is where it gets really, really interesting, because these things don't exist in a vacuum. They all influence each other, and that creates some really tricky hidden trade-offs.
See, it would be simple if these things just worked on their own, but they don't. And this is where that fancy SEM analysis really shines, because it uncovers the hidden chain reactions you might otherwise miss.
Let's just walk through this. First, when exports go up, it pushes farmers to be more intensive, so fertilizer use goes up too. Makes sense. But then, look at the next link. More fertilizer leads directly to higher CO2 emissions. And here's the kicker, the really interesting one at the bottom. The data suggests there could be a trade-off where focusing too much on exports might actually compete with meeting demand at home. So you can see this vicious cycle taking shape. Pushing for more exports can accidentally fire up the pollution engine. And that creates the central policy challenge. How do you get all the good stuff from trade without the really bad environmental fallout? Which brings us to the final and, frankly, the most important question. What can we do about it? What does all this research tell us about the best path forward?
The number one takeaway from the study really boils down to 2 words: policy coherence. In plain English, it just means you can't have your trade department doing one thing, your agricultural department doing another, and your environmental agency doing something else entirely. They all have to be on the same page, working together.
And based on that idea, the data points to 3 really clear strategies. First, double down on what works best, that powerful domestic, consumption-led growth. Second, get smarter with inputs. Focus on efficiency, getting more crop for every drop of fertilizer. And third, make sure that any big push for more trade is tied directly to sustainability goals.
At the end of the day, India's struggle isn't just about India. In a way, it's a preview of the challenge that pretty much every developing nation on Earth is facing.